Welcome to the Week 4 Pick and Ban recommendations. We're going to go into the first Super Week of the season, which means LCS starts on Wednesday this week, so don't forget to do your Pick and Ban. LCS is going to be moving to 13.3 next week, so I'm going to go over the patch notes and cover changes that I believe are going to affect the LCS Pick Ban. Mind you, I'm nowhere near an expert on the game. And just as a note, I think Aurelion Sol is probably just going to be permabanned for this patch, because he did receive a sizable rework, and they don't normally let the rework champs into LCS straight away, which won't affect them too much. The Bandage Toss nerf is more geared towards support, which we haven't really seen a whole lot in the LCS just yet. The E change is more geared towards the jungle, but I don't think it's enough to keep players like Spica from picking him. A Jarvan buff is always relevant to pro play. He's a staple jungler who got a buff to his shield strength, making it now scale with bonus AD. I doubt this makes him jump to the top tier professional play, but you might see a little more of it. For Cassante, they've reduced the duration of his CC on both his Q and W while making him squisher while he pops his ultimate. I'm not a Cassante expert, but I doubt this makes him unviable. He's in such a good spot right now, so I think he's still safe to pick him for fantasy. The LeBlanc buffs seem pretty decent. I wouldn't surprise to see some of the LCS mids pick her up a little bit more. Notably Harry, he's played a lot of LeBlanc in his career. For Umbral Glaive, they're going to nerf the cooldown of its ward clearing ability and reduce the bonus damage ranged champions do to wards, with ranged champs doing 2 damage to wards instead of 3. The nerfs affect marksman supports like Ashe, Caitlyn, and Kalista, but affect Caitlyn and Kalista a little bit more just because support Ashe builds don't really need this item. But as a whole, I doubt this really keeps marksman supports out of the meta, so supports like Ashe, Kalista, Caitlyn are still going to be seen across pro play. The role most impacted by this patch is definitely going to be support. First off, for Annie, they've given her a decent buff to her E, Molten Shield, buffing the shield strength, cooldown, and the retaliation damage when an enemy hits a shielded target. I don't think this is too relevant for this week, but you might see some supports attempt it. It's pretty strong in solo queue at the moment. 6 melee supports in totals all received buffs, with Alistar, Braum, Nautilus, Pyke, Rakan, and Thresh all being hit with buffs. Nautilus was already starting to see a rise in priority, so we might see him a little bit more. And with Xayah being a main beneficiary of the crit changes in 13.1b, Rakan might see a little more play as Xayah comes into the meta. For the top lane, Cassante is still the highest resident champ in North America and across all major regions. I think nerfs might bring him down a little bit, but he's still going to be the best pick going forward until we see otherwise. Renekton was featured a lot last week, getting picked 4 times. He's an option if your top laner hasn't played Cassante this year. Jax is also a decent option, being picked 3 times last week, and has seen more play than Renekton throughout the split so far. For the jungle, Sejuani goes into week 4 as the clear favorite jungle, being picked 7 times last week. Much like Cassante, you should pick her if your jungler has played at least a game with her. Maokai is an okay secondary option if that isn't the case, while Wukong and Vi Party has gone down quite a bit compared to the start of the season, so I'd avoid these 2 for the time. In the mid lane, Azir and Sylas return as top picks for the mid lane, while last week we saw the emergence of Taliyah. Taliyah is a great pick if your mid laner has shown you can play it, as her roaming playstyle lets her get into fights early, while also being a solid team for a fighter late in the game. Again, the mid lane meta is pretty wide open, so your best bet is to just run one of Azir, Sylas, or Taliyah, but the other options are definitely available, such as Victor, Ryze, or Sin. The bot lane continues to be dominated by Lucian and Zeri, and that isn't likely to change considering there's no hits to them or their supports going into 13.3. Caitlyn had a very good week 3 with 4 picks and 6 bans, establishing her as a very good option going into week 4. Lucian, Zeri, and Caitlyn all make up the top tier pick ban options for the bot lane, while Sivir and Ezreal are riskier options you can try if you need. After 2 weeks of no Yuumi picks or bans in NA, I think we can officially say that she's a non-option for pick ban in fantasy. Ashe is still banned a little too much to get looked at, while Lulu and Nami still get solid playtime due to their synergy with Zeri and Lucian. Similarly, with Caitlyn getting into a lot more games, we're seeing much more Lux play, with 3 games of Lux in week 3. Support should be the role most affected by 13.3, with lots of buffs to melee supports, and depending on how much this shakes up the support meta, we could even see further shifts into the bot lane meta, so this will be something to look forward to in the next coming weeks. Nautilus, Thresh, and Rakan all seem on the cusp of priority, so we'll have to keep our eyes on them, but for now, just stay on range supports like Lulu, Nami, and Lux, because it'll likely take time for the support meta to completely change, as teams don't normally just flip their strategies immediately. Now that you guys have seen your team play for 3 weeks now, you probably have a decent idea of how good your team is compared to others, so I thought this would be a good time to talk about when and how to make risky pick and bans. My basic idea is that if if you think you're going to lose, you should incorporate riskier picks and bans because you might as well try something compared to accepting the loss. Kind of similar to the idea that if you're down a lot in League, you might as well try to win a YOLO fight rather than let the other team suffocate you slowly. Another reason is if you're likely to lose, you don't want your picks and bans to match your opponents because that favors the stronger team. So instead, the strategy is to choose less pick champions to hopefully get the 1.5 times boost to help you swing your week in your way. So how do you know if you're likely to lose? I look at the average base scores of your team against theirs. Base score is a little more indicative of player strength than just fantasy. If there's no major difference, i.e. by 10, you probably don't have to worry, but if it's higher, you should consider a little more risk. Another thing to consider is the strength of schedule. I'll have a video assigning numbers to teams based on strength of schedule, but a basic way to do this is counting how many times your fantasy players play the top 5 teams in TL, 100 Thieves, C9, EG, and FlyQuest, compared to their players. If you play the top 5 teams more often, you might want to incorporate a little more risk into your pick ban, as it's less likely that your players are going to be winning their games compared to your opponents. So what exactly is a riskier pick ban? My idea for riskier pick bans are champions that aren't exactly on the top of the meta, but are played just enough to be considered. A good example of this is Ezreal, where Ezreal isn't meta compared to Caitlyn, Zarya, Lucian, but he's picked enough to make him viable, and certain ADs in the league might consider him for the new week. For these choices, you definitely need to look at the player's match history. This should be a champion they've played lots in their career, such as Harry's LeBlanc or Prince's Ezreal, or picked lots like Spica's Amumu. As a disclaimer, this does not mean to completely abandon the meta. There's some roles like top and jungle where there's a very clear best champ or two. You probably shouldn't take risks in these roles, as you don't want to give the opponent free bonus points or have them get a free ban on your players. Thanks again for watching. Feel free to ask anything down below and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Good luck on your week.